Hello and welcome to the Calm Waves podcast. In this episode, Dr. Doug Cowan and myself explore a couple different topics that I would like to just go over before you jump right into it. We kind of jumped into the podcast right away and just kind of hit record. We were talking about the complexities of OCD and how the brain processes uncertainty and how that relates to OCD. So it was an interesting conversation, and we decided just to kind of jump right into it. A couple of other things that were fun to talk about in this conversation was about goal setting and how the brain really likes goal setting. So we do that kind of towards the end of the podcast. But yeah, hopefully it's a fun podcast for you. It's a format we haven't done in a while, where it's just my dad and I, Dr. Cowan and I, just talking about what the brain looks like, some conversations we've been having with other people. So I hope you enjoy it. So let's go roll right into the podcast.
How OCD involves difficulty processing uncertainty. And this is, think about our brains, that our brains are always looking for pattern. And when there's uncertainty, we try to recall things from the past that are similar. This is like Mark Anthony Smith stuff, Ashton Smith, that, he'll say the brain learns or performs best when it's somewhere stuck between mastery of a subject and chaos. That you're out of balance with the chaos, but you've mastered things that are real similar, so you can perform in this situation. I've never seen a ground ball like that before, but I've seen 10,000 other ground balls before, and so I can deal with this one. Somewhere between chaos and mastery. And so this study is just saying basically that people with OCD have trouble with the brain processing through uncertainty. I've never seen this before, so I need to become rigid and stay out of the world where there's uncertainty. Check that doorknob 18 times.
Yeah, what would be because we're just diving into this. I'll do an intro later. So what would be the definition of, like, when you say, because when I think of OCD, I think of, again, moving the door handle and, checking the door handle, or germaphobe, or, all of those types of things. So you're saying that with uncertainty of what could happen, it could be based off of, or at least helped through, the improvement of certain brainwaves?
Yeah, that apparently there's certain parts of the brain. Let's see what the study says here. Aberrant activity in the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and anterior insula during decision-making tasks. So these are parts of the brain that crunch information and then decide what's the next best step to do. So that's what has to work well during that time between mastery. I've mastered these things, but there's uncertainty over here. So it has to make decisions of how to proceed. And people who don't do that step well, because certain parts of the brain are functioning less well at that decision-making process, then it's just easier to control the situation by eliminating variables. How's that for whatever?
Mm-hmm.
So I am going to wash my hands 15 times because there still might be something on it. Or I am going to check the door 20 times because there still might be, these are variables. So we want to say things like, well, people with OCD are just trying to control the situation because their life has been out of control or chaos or whatever, psychological reason we want to put on it. And the study is saying, no, we've got some brain issues going on here, that in the normal way, brain is going to process the road that we travel from things we've mastered, learned in the past, to a new thing in the future, the chaos of uncertainty, we'll call it that. The parts of the brain that process that aren't working like they should. And so the best way to deal with that, it might be a really good choice, is OCD. Whether it's a choice or not, I don't know. I mean, it's like that's how it's handled, is I'm going to be stuck with what I know and just sort of get jammed up because I can't deal with chaos. I mean, at a really big scale. Like, I don't even know if it's a soul issue or a choice or whatever. It's like the brain is saying, no, we're just not doing that. Let's just stay stuck over here and do this perseveration or OCD. I mean, I haven't read the whole study, but it is pretty interesting. And yeah, I think your question about brainwaves, I think the brain waves are a reflection of certain parts of the brain working better, that the brain waves change. So we see the brain waves change, indicating that parts of the brain are functioning better. And what I like about, let's say, direct neurofeedback or any form of neurofeedback is it's helping different parts of the brain to perform better. And then we see that reflected in a healthier looking pattern of brainwaves.
It's interesting that you talk about like the healthy brain, because I think of with OCD, for example, we think of like chemical imbalances. Like we'll talk about that. We'll talk about in the brain there might be some chemicals that aren't working correctly, but we don't go into our brainwaves working correctly. We think that they're there. We know that they're we can see them. They're functioning, but in the sense of like healthy brainwaves, that's something that even I'm thinking of that right now. I don't think we've ever really talked about in the sense of, I mean, you've dealt with kids with ADHD, for years and years and years. And it was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, delta waves that are working too hard or amplified?
Slow brainwave. Yeah, slow brainwave activity and the slower band. So it's delta and theta activity. Just way more energy in that band than there should be as compared to the energy in the beta band, higher frequency band. Yeah.
Because there's also we do the cryos test that is more performance based when it's like, how's your brain functioning? Like we can see like working memory and things like that are much more performance based. But from a brainwave based, is there tests and things to be done through that can be like, here's an optimized brain, or is every brain super unique in the way it produces its brainwaves?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, the cryos assessment, anything that's going to score that's low on the cryos, that's valid, like the person did it, they just didn't perform well. That's an indication of a certain system or place in the brain that's not working great. Just like brain waves that are abnormal, that's not the right word, but not optimal, are indication of certain systems or places in the brain that aren't working great. Just a different way of looking at it. Because either way, the problem is performance. So Cryos is that's a good tool for that. Just like looking at EEGs are. I was talking to a retired hockey player yesterday, and so we were talking about brainwaves and his life. And I said, all right, this is what I see. I wasn't watching his personal brainwaves, just from the past. We were talking similar conversation of this. I said, these squiggly lines that mean nothing. Well, it's because you've got billions of brain cells that are working and they're firing and they're not working in unison. They're just doing their job. So there's no real waves to it. And then sometimes I see these spindles of just perfectly formed up and down spindles scroll by. And this is where, let's say, the electrodes are in the front part of the head. And then they're gone and it goes back to the junk noise. And so what it means is that at that moment, the brain waves from some part of the brain, the waves go everywhere. They go in a sphere. So we got all kinds of brain waves in our head. We just have leads at certain places, and we're only picking up what comes to those places. And whether it's 19 leads or 2 leads, we're only picking up what comes to those places. So what I told him was the only time I see this pattern is working with hockey players or football players. And then after 5 or 6 sessions of direct neurofeedback or low energy neurofeedback, never see it again. And that indicates that part of the brain that was working at half speed or 10% is back online. It's working again. So when we see high wave forms, that is a part of the brain that's running in neutral. So like your car, put your car in neutral and it goes wah, 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 wah. So like beta activity, people talk about beta brain waves, and there aren't. It's beta activity, beta energy level, but because all the brain cells are firing, they don't make waves. Waves are from some part of the brain in neutral. So like an alpha brainwaves are made when you close your eye, because the whole back quarter of your brain has nothing to do when you close your eyes. So it goes into neutral and it makes these alpha brainwaves. And then you can learn to do it on purpose, but you can just do it by accident by closing your eyes and putting that part of the brain in neutral. So theta activity is you're putting other parts of your brain in neutral, and it just is in neutral slower. The idle speed is slower. And delta activity comes from another part of your brain that's always trying to tell your whole brain, let's just go to sleep. That's like the let's go to sleep club. And it's making that message of let's go to sleep all the time. So we see the delta activity. It's a simple way to think about it. So yeah, there's something about neurofeedback that helps to fix those parts of the brain that were jammed up. The electrical flow at that part of the brain was jammed up because of something. Trauma does it. Post-traumatic stress disorder, that kind of trauma does it. And getting kicked in the head by a mule, that does it. And, different blows to the head will jam up the electricity flowing through the brain. Yeah, the brain, we read in the newspaper and we see on TV brain studies, and the world took a turn 50 years ago, 80 years ago, that all medicine was going to be pharmaceutically based. And I mean medicine, let me think of a better word, all healthcare was going to be pharmaceutically based because you could make drugs and companies could own drugs and drugs work. So drugs work to help change the brain chemistry, blood flow, that kind of part of the physiology of the brain or the body, and you perform better. Ritalin gets a bad rap because maybe it was overprescribed because it works. People don't use stuff that doesn't work. We just, for most medications, we don't know why it works, really. I mean, we can make a model of, well, it's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And so by blocking the reuptake system, we get more serotonin in the brain. 3 years ago, a study came out and said has nothing to do with depression. What? That's what they've taught me for the last 40 years. What do you mean nothing to do with? So what does it have to do with? So even Len Oaks, 35 years ago, his theory of Prozac was not that it changed the brain chemistry to help with depression, but that it was like fertilizer in the brain helping with neuroplasticity and neurogenesis so that you could form new neural pathways faster and you could change the way your brain worked to make it healthier and happier, whatever. That was interesting. And he's probably right, even though 35 years ago that was laughed at. But the brain's not just chemical. I mean, it's electrical, and it's a 3-watt battery, and it can run low on energy. And what it does, it has all kinds of problems like depression or all kinds of things are from the electrical activity of the brain being out of balance. So yeah, the neurofeedback helps to optimize that. Things like the cranial electrical stimulation units, the Calm box, modulates that. The frequencies in the brain that are running amok, it helps to tune them in. So those physical parts of the brain work better because they're both chemical and electrical devices inside our skull. So it's pretty fascinating stuff.
It's one of those things that we've been talking about, and over the last couple of years. I know you've been doing it for many, many years, but in my world, starting up Calm Waves and trying to get it out there of talking to people about it. It is interesting how with the conversations that have been taking place, a lot of people don't know about this. And we've had discussions about this too, of where therapists that are trained aren't trained in this type of medicine or these types of treatments. It's just something that's not really in their lexicon of when they're trying to help somebody. They'll go to more physical things, like, as you said, medicine in that way. I know I was just talking to a guy who's a pastor, and he was like, why have I never heard of this? Burnout is one of the biggest thing in ministry and being a pastor. And he's talking about, I got to take care of my body. I got to take care of my, my mental side of it. But no one ever talks to me about the brain. Guys like Dr. Amen are amazing because I think they're bringing a lot of those things to the forefront of making it more accessible for people to see their brain scans and seeing what's going on. But the treatment side of it is still the mystery side of things for a lot of people, where they don't know what to do. My brain, depression, I can see depression in my brain. What do I do? Well, is it, changing my diet, changing my, those types of things? But, what we're seeing is that you have this, kind of this other part that's just not seen as much. And, while you were talking, I was just thinking of like the car radio of, if you're looking at something like a healthy part of a car, probably not a radio, probably more of like the electrical side of it, the computer side of it and things like that. You've got, how do those all work? The lights working and, making sure that that all works well. So you can start up the car and you can hear it, or, the dashboard doesn't work anymore, or, whatever that kind of looks like, kind of the analogy of it. But, it's kind of a forefront type of technology, but it's been around for a long time. I mean, that's the fun part about it, is it's not something new in the sense of it's been discovered new, but just the application of it has been newer,
Yeah.
you've used it a lot, but, it's other people are learning about it for the first time as well.
Yeah, it's just relatively unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're talking about cars, I'm thinking, so when I was younger than you, we would work on our own cars, and we would not only change spark plugs, but we would have to have little tools to gap them just right. And, the gap in the spark plug. We'd have a little thing we'd slide in, and we'd press and we'd get the gap exactly right. And then we'd put the spark plug in and put new wires on. And then we'd tinker with this thing or that thing to put a little light on the timing chain. We'd do stuff to tune up the car. We'd manually do all this stuff. And now computers do almost all of that. And computers make it so complicated you have to take your car into the shop, get some guy to do it. But computers are doing most of it. But back in the day, we did most of it. Radio. We used to tune radios with a dial. So you had to get the frequency tuned in just right. Gosh, if it was windy, you would have to tune it over here. And if it wasn't windy, you'd do it here. And if it was daytime, it would be here. And if it was nighttime after sunset, it would be over here. You have to tune a radio station in. And now it's just all digital. So, but all of that is what we call modulation, that we would tune up the car. We would modulate the car. And certainly radio, electrical waves, you talk in terms of modulation, tuning it in. It has to be modulated at the broadcast tower and has to be modulated at the radio receiving it. That's the neurofeedback thing. And that's the CES unit, the Calm Box thing. Calm Box is literally a neuromodulation device that helps tune in the way the limbic system and the back half of the brain function so that it performs optimally. You get a good signal out of that part of the brain, and the reticular activating system that tells you what to pay attention to at the right time so you pay attention better. It tunes that in. And direct neurofeedback is like the computers in your car doing it for you. You don't have to do it yourself. It's taking care of the timing, it's taking care of the functioning, all those things that are involved in your car running right. It really has some parallels with what the direct neurofeedback does, because it's your brain talking to the computer system, talking back to your brain, telling it what to
change, what's out of tune,
yeah.
And then it's tuning it for you, or it's allowing the brain to tune itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's given kind of the feedback back and forth.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it that I will probably use in the future. So thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
I think it's such an interesting conversation because you can't see it. It's invisible, just like Wi-Fi and radio waves and all of those types of things. They're all invisible. We know that there's energy coming out, and so now it's just being able to harness it and to go, okay, how do we? And what my thought also goes back to is like, what does breathing do? Does breathing help with your brainwaves? Is that something that is that like? I mean, I don't know. I'm throwing it out there more of like not as a research-based type of a thing, but I think about the different ways we can impact, because basically it goes back to how we feel. Our feelings are going to be our indicators of the output. If I'm feeling anxious, that's an output. If I'm feeling focused, that's an output. If I'm feeling unfocused, that's an output. But there's so many factors that go, through that, when I think of like the stacks or the filters that have to go through there, this brainwave like filter is something that's just not talked about very much. We talk about your, eat well, exercise, it could be blood pressure, it could be blood flow, it could be, all these different things, but we don't think about the, what's my brainwave doing? How are those,
Yeah.
are those, and yeah, we'll end there. I'd love to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, and they're indicators of health. The brain's working optimally, and the brainwave patterns look like this. And then when the brain's not working optimally, the brainwave patterns look different. So chicken and egg. I don't know what causes what,
Mm-hmm.
but the better we can get the brain to work, the better the patterns within the brainwave energies that we can see. There's probably a band that we say within this band, this is
Mm-hmm.
good.
Optimal. Yeah.
Yeah. And like any bell curve, this is pretty good. If you're in the area, you're doing all right. And it's really easy to see things that are like outside of that. So it's easy to see stuff that, if it looks like this, it ain't right.
And that's what you're looking at. You're
it,
looking at that through the direct neurofeedback, correct?
yeah, the EEG scrolls across
The EEG. So you're looking through the bands of, oh, this is not right through EEG. Now,
yeah, the computer's analyzing all of that in real
Mhm.
time. So you can see the raw EEG and you can see a topographical breakdown of the different
Yeah.
energy bands and so on.
Which is also the conversation between treatments, like monitoring or testing versus treatment too. And because then you can do an EEG and go, all right, your brain's like this. Cool. The brain mapping. Cool. You're here, but it doesn't help with the goal of getting it better. Because it's just, I mean, it's like the cryos test we do. Like it's not there to build you to say here's what's getting better. It's saying, oh, here's a diagnostic report. Now let's see what we need to do next to get these things to work more optimal.
And to track progress in care, to track progress. So there's some value in brain maps, and it's kind of like pointing to, okay, here's sort of the root cause, this part of your brain or that, the imbalance between the hemispheres or whatever it might be. Here's the root cause. I pulled my hamstring, right, playing pickleball 2 months ago, and so I'm looking at the symptoms like my hamstring and the two ligaments behind the knee were messed up, and even down to my calf. A year ago, I had a high ankle sprain in that leg, and it would lasted like 4 months. So go to a doctor, see X-rays, make sure the knee's okay, and if it doesn't see the soft tissue, but we can get an MRI if you want to get an MRI, we can see how bad it's tore up or it's strained or whatever, and go to physical therapy. So ice it, do some exercises. So I go to a physical therapist, and she points out that my hips are tilted about 3 inches. Whoop. And I'm going, it has nothing to do with my hamstring. She says it's everything to do with your hamstring. Because now this leg is 3 inches shorter than this leg. And so every step you take, this leg is getting ready to snap. This leg you're pounding, you're running normally on it, but this one's getting ready to snap. And last year it snapped above your ankle, and this year it snapped in your hamstring. So if we fix the root problem with this series of exercises, it'll fix the root problem. And then when this heals, it'll heal. So that's a metaphor for the value of the brain map is you can go, here's the root problem. And with certain technologies, certain kind of neurofeedback technologies, you have to know what part of the brain you're going to treat. With direct neurofeedback or low energy neurofeedback systems, you don't need the brain map. Now, low energy lens systems use a brain map to guide them, but they don't need to. And the low energy neurofeedback systems, we don't even try. It's like, who cares? Because it works on optimizing the performance of the entire brain. So it would be like if I could walk in to a chiropractor's office and they just went, boom, you're fixed. It's like that. It fixes the root problem as well as the presenting problem. And that's ideal. It's faster, more impactful. It's just better. It's just a more advanced form of neurofeedback.
And the places we've been able to set these up at in 2 different places here in Phoenix, they're seeing kind of the result of using something like direct neurofeedback along with their therapy program because they're able to see people, as you said, go into the root cause too of, hey, if their brain is out of alignment or their brain isn't working functionally, no matter how much you talk to them, yeah, you might get some results, kind of down the road of framing up different things that are happening. But if you're able to make those adjustments as well, it's different of, going to a chiropractor for your hips and saying, all right, hey, you know what? You just have to learn how to run differently. It's like, oh, bummer. Like, it's still going to hurt, rather than being like, hey, we're going to fix your hips. And then you're just going to
Right.
have a better life because we're going to fix your hips. And so what,
Put a
with these
put a
therapists,
3-inch wedge on my shoe.
yeah, they're going to put a 3-inch wedge on your shoe. You're going to do this thing. You're going to have to walk. It's like, I don't want to do that. But it's like, I can go to the chiropractor and we can make your hips in alignment. We're going to be better. And so I think that's where these therapists are seeing the same thing, is where they're going, okay, if we can align the brain and talk to them about their life, we're going to get better results no matter what than just working on one half of the issue. And even in conversations with this pastor too, it's the same thing. It's going, instead of going, well, bummer, I guess you're going to have to leave ministry, or you're going to have to, figure this out. Hey, what if we fix this a little bit? What if we made it so that you could, last a little longer in here, or just be more optimized? I mean, optimize is kind of the word probably used the most when it comes to like what we do, but people aren't just seeing that side of things, of trying to optimize the brain to be the best that it can, because they just don't know.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting type of thought process when we're talking with people about this, of like, what does this do? And the difference between something like Dr. Amen does, where it's like, hey, he's really great at seeing what's happening under the hood, but what about fixing it? And we've just talked about so much about how we really value the idea of fixing things or making them better. No, we're not going to use the C word of curing, but we are going to be able to say, how do we help to optimize this? So I love also what Freedom Family does with their brain mapping, which is pre and post. So they'll do a little brain map pre session and seeing where the brain might be out of alignment, and then they'll show post and say, hey, look, now it's in alignment.
Right.
You're feeling better. So it's a much more of a smaller window that they're doing, but over time that the brain becomes more normalized that way. So that's a really cool kind of observation.
Yeah, it's a great way to show people. It's observational. That here's how your brain's working more optimally after 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what is it that causes the problems, and why does an emotional trauma cause neurological problems? How is that possible? It's an emotion. It's a memory. How is this possible? And there's something about energy flow with it, and with the brain being a, like we said, big electrical battery. Something about energy flow. And this is where you talked about health earlier, improving mitochondrial activity through the body by nutritional interventions. You can make your mitochondrial work better. Your brain will work better, because that's the energy producer for the body and the brain. So that's legit. And there are the next generation of psychiatrists, or people in that field generally, are going to have to be good at things like measuring mitochondrial activity in the body as an explanation for why somebody might be depressed. I think that's the next generation of, not total health care, but it's going to be the first intervention, is let's look at your health generally and look at the energy your body's producing generally. Head injuries can disrupt that. Trauma can disrupt that. Weirdly, I don't know. It just does. So that's an intervention to make. What makes the mitochondrial activity better, more optimal in both the brain and the body? And there's something about trauma, like we see this over across town at the facility that works with timed out foster kids, that there's this subgroup of trauma. We have post-traumatic stress disorder, and we have trauma, and trauma with a big T and trauma with a small t. And we have what's called complex trauma, where somebody is bullied, picked on, abused in childhood and teenage years. There's no escape. There's no place to go. And so they can dissociate. They can protect themselves somehow, but then they may end up in foster care, and that may or may not be a good thing, and so on. So by the time they're adults, or late teens or adulthood, and they're talking to a therapist, they're not bringing this up. They're not talking about it. We're done. We're good. But they live their entire life out of this world of survival. Everything's about survival, and they can very easily get into the fight or flight place. I mean, like really fast. Mm-hmm. Something reminds them of the past, and they're just all about fight or flight. Another picture here. Let's see if I can find it. So, see this, the brain. This is your brain. And when we have a problem, we're supposed to go to the frontal lobes and just figure it out. What's the solution to the problem? Rational thought. Hey, I'll call an expert.
Mm-hmm.
I'll call my tribe. I'll call my family. I'll get help, and we'll just deal with it like rational people. But if that doesn't work, or you have trauma issues, and your brain is wired this way, it goes right to the limbic system. And all of a sudden you're dealing with every problem from an emotional and survival point of view. And you're like, it's not that big a deal. Yeah, it is. Because now this part of the brain has taken over and is solving the problems, the limbic system, the amygdala, fight or flight, survival. And if that doesn't work, it goes back down here to the brainstem and you freeze. So they call it fight or flight or freeze. And this is just, I'm just going to roll over.
I think they need to add one to that just to make it a good process, and to think, fight, flight, or freeze. So you go, hey,
yeah, right. That's good. That's exactly right. So if people were raised in an environment where they thrive, the family was safe and family was nice and parents' names were Ozzie and Harriet and everything was good, then their brain is wired for success, learning, functioning, moving ahead, thriving, entrepreneurial thinking, success in athletics, whatever. If you grew up in an environment where it was awful and you're just trying to survive, doesn't mean you can't do well in life, but boy, something comes up and immediately you're 8 years old trying to lock yourself in your room. So those systems kick in. So what we've seen with working with these foster kids across town over there is when they do the direct neural feedback prior to a therapy session, it allows the brain to shift out of the fight or flight into the frontal lobes, into the thinking place where they can have more insight, work on problem solving, and work on actually healing the wounds of the past instead of being stuck in the wounds of the past. So that's how the technology can be linked up with therapists very well, work in conjunction with that. The technology also works with things like, I just got a text from somebody who has a seizure disorder, and yeah, the technology actually can work. That's how the whole neurofeedback world started 40 years ago, was in teaching people how to not have seizures. So it can work on things that are purely neurologically medical, functional, mechanical, as well as wounds and memories and traumas, and it helps with a whole variety of things.
Well, it makes sense with, again, the output is seizures, the output is fight, flight, and freeze. But it all lives in kind of the same areas, or, can be kind of caused by kind of the same things. It's just the output's different. I mean, what is it that somebody who experiences trauma now has seizures, or head injury now has seizures, or it's kind of putting those things together, but knowing that hey, if we can just help heal this part of the brain or optimize this part of the brain, this will hopefully get better. Maybe this is one of the root causes. We can do this, and now you're not going to have this downstream effect of the seizures or whatever that looks like. But yeah, going back to the foster care side of things, it's such an interesting technology to be able to use in conjunction with those people that are therapied out. It's the classic kind of thing with foster care is, I don't want to talk to another therapist about my thing, because the therapist can't help them unless they know some background about them. They can't, that's what they're trained to do. Tell me about your childhood growing up, because that's how they're going to fix it. But they're like, I don't want to reopen these wounds again. I don't have to relive these types of things. So the direct neurofeedback or the Calm Box or CES unit, that helps with that fight and flight kind of side of things, to go, hey, let's turn this down so I can just think about this. This is what happened. I was just listening to a podcast the other day about agents, not GPT agents, but agents in the sense of people that are outside of the situation. And it was just contextualizing, if you have someone who's non-emotional about a situation, they make better decisions. And so, because they're able to look at it and go, all right, well, make this. Well, I don't want to make this, because so that's where those types of decision making is better when you're not in that fight and flight. And you just talked about, when you're like, oh yeah, there's no emotion behind this. I just know that this is the best decision based off of the evidence that I have. You might get an expert that has a different point of view, but in those therapy situations, they're able to think through it. Yep, this is my childhood. This is what happened. Just like they would an agent that's, somebody who's not emotional about it, being able to talk through those situations too, and not freeze because it's like, I don't want to go there. I'm good. Like I don't trust you, or that rapport's not there. So there's so many of those factors, but this helps bring it down and optimize the brain. So it's going kind of like two different things as well, and they can work through. And then they can also have, the therapist goal is to have not interventions, but coping skills. Hey, if you have these types of things that happen, hey, here's a coping skill that you can do, and you can apply these coping skills. That's another thing that I know that some therapists have said is, oh, my client applies their coping skills a lot better now by doing these types of things. So they're listening to me, but it might just be the brain's optimized a little bit more too.
Sure, that's right. Brain's more open to doing something new. Yeah. It's nice to see a person's brain working better and see what comes from it. The brain works better from a lot of different factors, like your self-talk, because the brain's plastic. It's going to adjust to whatever your environment. An abusive environment, it's going to adjust to that. A thriving environment, it's going to adjust to that. And self-talk is environment as far as the brain's concerned. So, I'm an idiot. I can't do anything right. It leads to your brain functioning one way. Now I can do this. Yep. Just say yes. We'll get it done. Let's go to work. Work hard, work fast. Don't stop. Look for more. Okay. That's a whole nother way for the brain to wire itself and to work.
I would say one thing that I've been working on more is the goal setting. That has helped me out a lot more with just focusing, and because I use the Calm Box, I use those types of things too, those interventions. But I think having a place of like going somewhere of, all right, here's my goal for the week, or here's my goal for this, or that, seeing the check marks off, or whatever kind of that satisfying type of thing of like, oh yeah, I felt like I did good today. I'm not just leaving things on the table and going, oh man, there's just so much to get done, or, whatever that looks like. I know you use, let's finish with this too, of the kind of goal setting, takeaway type of a thing. What's the method that you use for, I know I call you and be like, I'm getting done with my list. You're a list guy, but you have a specific thing of, I think, how you use your lists.
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
I know you had, at one point you had to-do lists, and then you got like to get done list, or like I got done with these things. Like it's just moving those, the wording a little bit. I'm not like, I didn't get my to-do list done, but it's going, look what I got done today.
Yeah. So there's two things that I'd love to talk to people about. One is to start off the day with a gratitude exercise, 3 to 5 persons, places, or things that you're truly grateful for. Take a minute to savor each one. Write it down on a piece of paper. Thank God for that person, that place, that thing. True gratitude lights up the whole top of your head. Changes the way your brain is going to work for the rest of the day. And then to have some point in the year, you have your goal, your 25-year goal, your 5-year goals. What do you want your bigger and better future to look like 5 years from now? And then how do I get from here to there? Bigger and better future. You want to light up your brain? Stay focused on your bigger and better future and the things you need to do to get from here to there. The 5-year goal is going to be a 4-year goal after a while, and then a 3-year goal after a while, and 2-year goal after a while, because you're moving, right? Time is passing by, but it's your goal. So you're always going to think of, all right, then what do I need to accomplish this year to reach my 5-year bigger and better future? And what do I need to accomplish in the next 6 months, the next 2 quarters, or the next quarter, the next 90 days? What do I need to accomplish? And to have that list pretty well thought out, it's actually takes some work with some engineering, but you're actually thinking this through. And then what do I need to do in the next month or the next week? So that generates a list. These are the important things I need to get done in this list as a piece of the puzzle, putting together a bigger and better future over 5 years. So if it's, I want to be a therapist in 5 years. All right, you got to finish school and you got to read some books and you got to do some internships and you got to do, your 5-year program. So you lay that out. What do I got to do in the next 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, this week? What have I got to do? Maybe it's I got to apply for school. All right, do that. So that's one way to look at goal setting, is from the framework of a bigger and better future. Gives you energy, gives you vitality, gives you a reason to get up in the morning, good goals. Now, there can be lists that we'll start with as to-do lists. All right, these are the things this week. And if you own a business, there's all kinds of to-do lists that could be, I got to buy staples. I got to go to Home Depot. I got to, do that kind of stuff. That's just a way of keeping a business functioning, a house functioning, or whatever. Ideally, as let's say an entrepreneur or a business owner, you want to be able to look at all those things in the course of a week. These are all the things that have to get done. Write them on a 3x5 card. Figure out what things are $15 an hour jobs, what things are $50 an hour jobs, and what things are $300 an hour jobs that only you can do because you're the entrepreneur. You've got the vision, you've got the experience, you've got the understanding, and you want to get rid of the $15 an hour thing. So in the course of the next 90 days, you want to hire somebody to go to Home Depot and buy a hose or the staples at Office Max or whatever, right? You don't want to be caught doing those $15 an hour things because you want to spend as much time as you can on the $300 an hour thing. And over the period of perhaps a year, 6 months, if you can, you want to now the $50 an hour things, you want to farm that out too. So that's why God made CPAs and Fiverr and, these other things where you can rent professionals to accomplish a task so you don't have to do it. So you can spend even more time on the $300 an hour things that only you can do. Only you. That's being an entrepreneur. So that's another way of looking at goal setting is what do I got to do? What do I do in the course of 2 weeks? How do I farm out a third of those out? And then over the next year, how do I farm out, the $50 an hour thing? And then what's left over, I heard the story of a guy who's a gazillionaire who owns a digital something company. And he takes all of his tasks for the week, and they're all on a 3x5 card. He writes each task on a 3x5 card. And he starts off each day with the stack of things on his left hand, over by his left hand. And then he plays the game to see today how many of those can I get done. And when he gets it done, he moves it over into a pile by his right hand. So he actually starts with the easiest things. Because if he has a stack of 40 things he's got to do in the week, today he wants to get as many done as he can. And then tomorrow he's going to race himself again. And he gamifies his to-do list. Nothing personal, he just gamifies to get as many little items done as he can. So for an athlete, that would be, all right, what do I need to do in my workout schedule? Write it down, gamify it. Make today 3% better than yesterday.
That's awesome.
And go for it. Go get it. All kinds of coaches will talk about, we're working out today, just be 1% better than yesterday. 1%. That's all. 1%. You were great yesterday, 1% better today. And over a period of time, you certainly improve. So those are some of the different concepts. And I talk about the different concepts based upon what their situation is. In your weekly schedule, start with sleep, the most important thing you got as a business owner, athlete. First thing you do is schedule sleep. Second thing is you schedule time with the people you love, wife, your kids. You schedule that, and then you let your training and your business go around those things. Otherwise, you end up accomplishing a whole bunch of stuff, but you do it by yourself because you're not with your wife or your kids. So the things that are truly important, schedule those first, and the things that are important for generating income, schedule those second. But anyway, that's some of the advice that I talk to people about. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but
no, that was perfect. That was great. I think you really hit on the point of the perspective first. I mean, I love the 25, 10, 5, kind of those types of things, because that helps with, hey, if I want to be the best in the world at something, what do I do today? I don't know. What do you want to do in 5 years? Well, let's reverse engineer that. And then every day you're working on that bigger goal, whether it's reading a book, reading a chapter, it gives that perspective to it, and not just being like, I'm doing it because someone told me I needed to do it. It just changes it's the same task, but different heart behind it. And so I think that's where, a lot of things, come from is, and that helps with that perseverance type of thing. I know the reason why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because of this. And so I think there's a lot of organizational things that you brought in there of like, well, what do I work on first? Well, try to get the $15 an hour away things first. And then, so you can spend more time in the $300 an hour things. Okay. That's a good mechanism to go, people talk about importance, people talk, there's a lot of different metrics you can use within that framework. But no, I think that's I think that's great. And then it helps with the gamification where you're going, it's not a to-do list, it's a to get done list. There's things you can do within that, but without that framework of where do I want to be in 25 years, that bigger and better future thing, those other things can fizzle and not, be able to look at that, in the right lens. Well, let's wrap up here. That was great. I love being able to talk to you about this kind of stuff. And
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Gal.
it's so fun. And, next week we'll talk about more stuff. We'll talk about other types of brain and life types of things, because I think, someone who's listening to this, hopefully they can see a different perspective on how they can just live their life a little bit better and more optimal and all those types of things. So, because that's our goal.
Very good.
All right.
Well, thank you.
All right. Till next
We'll
time.
see you soon.